Sunnis generally held that whereas immorality disqualified a candidate from election, he was not to be deposed for it if he developed it after a session. So if you have already become the Khalifa, and then if you are caught, drinking or doing something wrong, etc., you cannot be deposed. Okay, that should have been the case before, but not afterwards. They are very opposed to armed civil war. After 4 civil wars, they come to the view that fitna is the worst thing ever, and we have to do everything in our power to avoid bloodshed, to avoid disorder, to avoid civil war, etc. And hence, even an immoral, even a bad ruler is better than civil war. And they would often rely on the Hadith to say this, that the worst thing that can happen to the community is civil war. Let the ruler be whatever they are. Stop judging the ruler. Just you go live your own life, etc. Let him be. And so they also then began to present various justifications for usurpation. Usurpation, of course, means when somebody takes over power. Al-Mawardi is one of the main writers in this regard. A governor could be created by either appointment or usurpation. So if a governor, somebody has taken over a part of the government, he wrote saying that the Khalifa could then give him governorship of that particular region, and that would be fair and just and so on. He could be regularized by the Khalifa himself. So what Al-Mawardi recommended was moreover what had long been practiced, etc., but he was the first to justify it and say it's fair to do that, no problem. Al-Jawaini presented a similar doctrine justifying the acquisition of the entire Khilafat now by usurpation. And this is not just a theoretical debate, because this is exactly what happened with the Seljuks. The Seljuks came, then the Ghaznavids came, then the Mongols came, many other etc. dynasties came and so on. And the Sunnis said, it's okay, even if they've come by the sword, it was by the will of God, and we will not rebel, etc. Instead, what we're going to try and do is make them into good Muslims. One of the figures, very important figures in this regard, is Al-Ghazali. He argued that without an Imam, Sunniism could not be a credible force, because he saw that in his mind, one of the big movements of his time was, of course, Ismaili Shiaism. And it was a huge, huge movement in his time, so he countered it. And he saw that Ismailism took its power mainly from its central doctrine of imamate, that the imam is the person that we have to follow, and he has the batini ilm, and he can even reinterpret religion, and so on and so forth. In fact, the Ismailis had elevated the imam to be kind of like, had the ability to do all sorts of supernatural things, and had esoteric knowledge of the world and nature and so on. So Imam Ghazali also thought that the Khalifa had to be powerful, had to be strong to counterpose the Ismailis. A candidate would become Imam by virtue of receiving allegiance from a single powerful man who commanded obedience. So what does this mean? The powerful man, of course, is the Sultan. The Sultan is somebody who comes in with a sword and manages to conquer the Abbasids. It could be the Seljuks, it could be one of the Turks. Now he's come into power, the Seljuks have come, and ostensibly they have said, we accept the Abbasids as the Khalifa. Okay? And Imam Ghazali was the first to say, yes, that is in accordance with the principle of Islam. He has elected this person or accepted this person as Khalifa. Now that Khalifa ought to be considered legitimate. In other words, one person, the Seljuk Sultan, could select the Khalifa. Ghazali accepted imamate by usurpation if the usurper was a Qurayshi. So the only condition he placed was that the Seljuk Sultan had to select somebody who was a Qurayshi. He could not select anybody who was outside of that pale. This is a very important part, by the way, of this political doctrine of that particular point in time. You've seen already that aside from the Kharjis, pretty much everybody is saying that imamate or khilafat, etc., has to be within a certain tribe or family, etc. This is how the Arabs view these things, aside from the Kharjis, as I said. So the political doctrines or political philosophy of medieval Islam highly rated or considered genealogy extremely important. Let me tell you something else that's very interesting. From the literature we get from those old times, in fact, we get a lot of what is called genealogical literature. What the hell is genealogical literature? The Arabs and Persians, they love to write books upon books about who was related to whom, because at that time in history, people really genuinely felt that traits of courage and valor and truthfulness and honesty and virtue and all other traits, good and bad, were inherited from their families, if not in a certain direct genetic sense, then certainly in the sense कि सोहबत के नतीजे में, as a consequence of having been raised by those people, they were raised by the same values and so on. And this is not unique again to Islam. In fact, you can find this in Europe, you can find this in Africa, you can find this also in China. This is again one of those universal features of medieval history. So Al-Ghazali was of the view that public authority today follows nothing but military power, whereas whoever receives allegiance from the holder of military power should be recognized as the Khalifa, and whoever exercises independent power while obeying the Khalifa as regards the Friday oration and the coinage, he is the Sultan whose decision and judgment must be carried out in the provinces. The public authority of the Sultans in the distant lands who pay allegiance to the Khalifa is effective. This is a direct quotation from Al-Ghazali himself. Right? So you can see that this was his political philosophy. Although Al-Ghazali is not mainly known as a political philosopher, he is mainly known as a theologian and as an anti-philosopher. So this again introduces the idea of secular and sacred, which is what? God had given one power to the prophets and another power to the king or to the man of the sword, etc. And he had made it incumbent on the people of the earth that they should submit themselves to the two powers. My God, this is just like the idea of the two powers amongst the Christians. If the Khalifa is the Imam, his constant occupation must be prayer. There is no sense in the Caliph's interference in the affairs of ephemeral earthly rule. This is the business of the sultans. So once again you see that Al-Ghazali is of the view that administration, war, taxes, this is the stuff of, who is responsible for this? The Sultan. And who is responsible now for religious side of things, etc., and prayer, and in a certain sense, the figurehead of the state is the Khalifa. So the Sunnis were of the view that compromise is always better than conflict. We don't want no trouble, etc. When the Caliph was really a king, the Sunnis accepted him as a quasi-Khalifa. When the upstart rulers usurped the position of Khilafat governors, yani when somebody usurped the governorship, the Sunnis responded by saying, okay, just regularize him as a governor, etc. When the caliphs lacked a crucial qualification for office, the Sunnis recognized him as legitimate with reference to overriding necessity. इसको हम कहते हैं doctrine of necessity, जो पाकिस्तान में भी बहुत ही मशहूर ज़माना है. When the kings usurped the position of the Khalifa, the Sunnis responded by encouraging them to submit themselves as incumbents to the Khilafat. You know, when somebody, they said, why don't you also run for Khilafat, etc. When the caliphs disappeared, the Sunnis responded by extending the title of Khalifa or Imam to rulers of any kind. So the criticism of Sunnis from other schools of thought have always been that the Sunnis have always been the ones that have just gone with the go with the flow kind of people. Whoever is in power is fine by us, right? And so on.